I'm going to try and do a quick video on better understanding uh, the North Korean state just a little bit. Um, so, um, there's a couple facts that are most important. First is that Korea had been under Japanese rule for over 3 decades. Um, and second, what North Korea basically got as a glimpse of the rest of the world from basically the entire first half of the 20th century was like the worst aspects of westernization. It was this combination of, the remnants of imperialism and modern competition from nation states, um, alongside the most labor exploitative versions of industrialization. And so, what sort of happens when this is what you see on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and you hear the stories of how this is impacting Koreans and other parts of the region? Um, at some point, you see that there is a demand for a stronger form of security. That's going to be necessary. And you also see that because there's so many outside systems, there's something somewhere where people want to be able to, um, people are going to want to be able to understand the regime that is ruling them. There's almost this idea that if we are a people and we have to be a state, what does that state look like so that we're still a people? And so that we can have this autonomy, so we can understand the securitization and stuff that's around us. And so, at some point you get, Kim Jong Il comes in. You have the Korean Civil War, which lasts for how many years? A long time. I don't think it was really over until like almost 1990. So technically, like almost like a 40 or 50-year conflict. And during this time, you basically have this sort of you have a value preference is what it is. Whatever that value preference is, where people are willing to keep choosing those same things. They're saying, well, our identity and our, whatever form of polity this is, whatever our political structure is getting better. And we're able to see that we're part of contributing to whatever this is. And there's not a blatant contradiction if our individual rights, if our individual choices are being stifled, then there's not a problem here. And so you're totally misunderstanding this because, if you want to see what the West or what Europe, what whatever the rest of Southeast Asia got back for their behaviors and activities, most of them have been pushing a ball up a hill for what appears to be very little reason. And if you were lucky enough to get to some form of economic wealth, you got that alongside massive amounts of socio-political disruption. And if that was you, you were also lucky because look around the world. Look around the world. If the U.S. or if whoever, whatever, if we take our sort of, if we take the mythological sort of like, arch nemesis that we have and the sort of strategic trajectory or whatever it is, and we are able to sort of make that more cohesive and integrative or whatever it is, you see that, basically if you're successful, someone didn't get to you, you probably got a little bit lucky, you got chosen, right? And you just ended up getting what you got, and now, basically you still have this fascist ideology where these people don't know who they are. They don't know what they're working towards. We at least have that. We do have that. So, and one of the things that I would imagine has always happened and this is just like a hypothesis, not knowing anything about North Korea, is that, if we take just what normal political theory would predict, what like you would read in something like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, take your pick. What we would probably see is that there's this gradual adjustment mechanism that happens, but it doesn't happen. Like in the US, we have network news, we have social media, we've had newspapers, we've had these large institutions like sports, like education, like entertainment that pop up, and these things are completely vast. They cover society. What I would imagine happens more in North Korea is that when you have these sort of pivotal moments, these shifts, there's a lot of fine tuning that happens, and that does so in order to respond to sort of the overall weight of of new institutional mechanisms, new government state mechanisms, in order to maintain that sort of connection to people, to the populace. The Volk, as Hitler would have said, old Hitler. He would have called you guys all the Volk. And so when you have this fine tuning, as well as you are starting to select these almost like load-bearing segments of the population, which are connected to infrastructure, it's deeper than a symbolic relationship. And you continue to build sort of the symbolism around things. There is almost a like an agnosticism about, well, is repression or violence or selling value, are any of these things any different? Does it matter what we take on? And it's like, well, no, this is the same sort of consequential decision. We're just doing it internally. And it's specifically about these things that you have to relate to. And so, what does that end up meaning? What that ends up meaning is that, when you look at like a place like Russia, or China, both of which are relatively more free than North Korea, and you're, like I've got a piece of chalk here or something, and I'm lifting it up, I'm gonna taste it when I pick it up. And so, that's another one, sort of just like the porousness of a society, which I would imagine is also partially true as you're thinking about, how this stuff works. Porousness, a certain porousness in these sort of lines. But you see it becomes much more, it's almost like this reflexive motion where if you have someone that, on the one hand you'd have, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, or someone else in government that are excited, eager to do something new, something different, or someone else has these new ideas that don't quite fit into the state structure. And it seems like you almost always have this really grandiose mechanism where as you start pushing, someone else pulls, because society can't really see or make sense of things that didn't come from this sort of fine-tuning effect. And so like in an analogous situation that we have in the US, is something like judicial reform. Like this is something we're doing right now in the US. And when you ask about judges or solicitors, trying to be more reasonable and do more working within the law based on principles that we know work for recidivism, for a lot of long-term goals. It becomes difficult for the courts to always make sense of other situations, right? And we might see this, right? What does the court do about someone that gets caught with a gram of crack cocaine and a firearm or something these days? Right? What do you do? What do you do? How much do you ask them? How much do you try and learn from this person? Who is this person? Did they just stumble into like this sort of drug deal and an illegal firearms deal or something? And you assume judges are all going to ask this, but what's going to happen, right? Necessarily is there's going to be some inability of civil society who's asked for this, who can see it happening in real time, to also make sense of the fact that there's still just these physical, tangible institutions of violence, and you're necessarily going to get voices on the right. You're going to get further nationalist voices who say this isn't part of our national identity. If it's part of our national identity, both of these things are, right? And so, I think for like the contextualization, we might need that sort of more complex model. It's capable of taking sort of a larger and a smaller process and building it into something, that's kind of more tangible or relatable. And so that's interesting, right? Because we should assume that we're able to work on one or two sides of this, right? And I'm sure I could have kept going on some of this other stuff, but just one of the things that I want to be able to like say or do, one of the things I'm just personally interested in, is that, as we see smaller aspects of some of these like institutional reforms, we see North Korea, not changing their total identity or anything like this, but they're going out and doing more things that look globalized that are going to increase pressure, presumably, right? I don't know how it couldn't. And sort of one of the things is that like you need to be able to push some of that stuff into your into just your view of whatever is happening that day, whatever's happening in the world. Not like you need to. It's not like that. But when people are asking the sort of the society to take more things in, and to somehow be able to shift out and move out some of the violence and repression and some of the other things that people don't like, be able to shift those around and make sense of those with other values and things like this. It's just important, right? It's just one of those things. You got to be able to do it, and so like there's like a progression that happened in the US when we thought about things like education and whatever else, where we started saying, well, there's gifted people, there's really smart people, and then we started saying, well, the US doesn't value smart people that can build airplanes, and our engineers, we value innovation. And then suddenly you have this entire service industry that's around manufacturing and product design, but it's also around innovation. It's something that anyone can do. You can wake up, you can grow up in Iowa or somewhere else, and you can be that innovative person. And so when you think of that, this type of thing where, you're able to sort of keep some form of like values and things like that, like I would imagine like we look at things like in the US as well, and people are ultimately going to want to get down on the level of justice to saying like, well, our prison systems, are they based on reform? Are they based on reducing recidivism? Are they based on human rights? Or are they punitive? And then at the same time, if you're a criminal, if you're a convicted criminal, are you like, you can be reluctant, like no one gives a shit, right? Like, are you repentant, or are you willing to sort of make changes, or are you a criminal? Which one is it? Like, that's the level of granularity where, it's hard for, even at some point, like, whatever. This is a U.S. problem, right? It's hard for judges to just be like, well, I'm going to throw my hands up in the air because I do have an idea of like what happens once I send someone to prison. I know who they meet. I know what happens. I know there's not a better way for it right now. And so what do? I can do the best thing I can in my courtroom. I can work with attorneys as resources, and I can work within the law. Like, right, we're sticking to that, and we have to be able to make tangible, concrete decisions around the calendar year, around all of these things, but we can't just let that sit forever. if that sits forever, then what it is that process is for people who are criminals, and we have another process for the others.